All right. My name is Brian Partee. Yeah, and I get the last name Party. I hear, oh, party time. Yeah, I heard that all the time. In fact, it's funny is I make this is not true, but I lie to people. I tell them my son's name is Raymond Jean, so it's Ray Jean Party. How's that?
That's a good one.
So got that in there. I did my time for about 20 years in Boys and Girls Clubs. That's where I first met Sabrina. So I did at two different clubs, and we had a massive growth. But both of my clubs were rural, and this is where the grant writing comes in. Is there's not unlike when you're in Dallas. I'm in Dallas right now, but unlike when you're in Dallas or Los Angeles or all these big cities, and there's a lot of foundations and there's a lot of pro sports teams and a lot of businesses and corporations. Sometimes when you're in a rural community, it's there's two or three things and that's all there is. So I needed to learn how to do something to help us grow. So I learned how to write grants. I learned how to present them properly. I actually became CFRE certified, which is kind of basically a federal grant writer. I have that skill. So I did that, and I did about $14 million worth in my 20 years just for my club, which is pretty great. So I'm excited about that. Anyway, and I live now in the North Dallas area, the Frisco, Plano, McKinney area, with my son and my wife, and yeah, everything else doing. I started my own business because I wanted a little bit more freedom with my son. Taking the clients I want to take, that kind of thing. And it's grant writing is not hard. I'm good at grant writing. And so I did that. But also, I will say this just as a quick commercial for my company. I've had skills in a lot of different things in different fundraising, resource development, working with small clubs, when I say clubs, Boys and Girls Club. I did stuff for Boys and Girls Club of America with small clubs. I did trainings and stuff like that. So, I'll encourage you to go to the link on my nonprofit marketplace to see all the different things and different ways I can help you help others.
That's right. And it's scrolling across this feed here. So you have his website.
Yes.
And I will brag on you. I think when we talked, you were about at $17 million in securing grants.
Mm-hmm.
So that's awesome because I absolutely hate grant writing. But as you know, and as you said, it's a necessary thing that you have to learn when you work in a rural club area. And I learned it and I did it. It's not something that I enjoy. So I always appreciate people who enjoy that process. So because you enjoy that process, I have about 4 questions here for you.
Bring them. Oh, hey, by the way,
Okay.
let's hold on. Let me first tell everybody out there, Happy Veterans Day to one of my favorite veterans, Sabrina.
Yes.
My father-in-law, who has since passed, he's my favorite veteran. Spent a lot of time in the Army, but I want to give props to you, Sabrina, because I know you were a military person yourself. So thank you for
Yes.
your service and all that good.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I was Army as well. So thank you for acknowledging that. All about that service life. So thank you so very much. And I'm going to hit all the places to eat. I'm just going to plug that in there. So I'm going to thank those restaurants who's going to feed me very well tomorrow. So
Right.
here are the questions that I have around grants. And it really is so that you can help with those like 4 major myths around grants. And I think that's why part of it was why I disliked grants. But a lot of it was the research part and the writing part, all the grant part. But here's the first question. Why do some people think getting a grant is like, winning this magical lottery for nonprofits? Is there a simpler way to explain the real challenges involved in getting grants?
Yeah. Yes. Well, let's take a look back at what grants are. To me, and I always tell my customers this, I always tell anybody I talk to this, grants are a bonus. You shouldn't budget for them because I've seen too many times of I could have written the best grant in the world. Oh, but one of the guys on the foundation board, his cousin wrote this grant and he's in better than I am. You know what I mean? You have that perception. I mean, I've talked to people who I was like, "What's your strategy?" Our resource development strategy is we're going to write the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Mhm.
There's a million people who do it. It's highly competitive. It's not quick. It's not quick. In fact, Sabrina and I were talking off air. Is I'm working with a customer right now, and they're like, "Why aren't we seeing as much money as we thought we were supposed to see?" And I said, "I've applied in the past month. I've applied for $2 million worth of grants, but you've got to understand that process. Some of those boards that vote on their grants when the foundation boards get together and vote on their grants, they're not meeting until January. So they'll meet in January and then they'll get together and then they'll decide in February, and the loan secretary person will then send me a letter of acceptance or denial. It's a longer process. So you really, really need to plan it out. The other thing you got to remember is there's some things that you need to do. How long has your business been around? You need to be in business for a while. I mean, they don't want to say, hey, foundations don't want to help startups more than they want to help successes. So if you've been around for 10 years and you're not going out of business and your money keeps going up and you're getting more donors and stuff like that, they want to be part of that success. But if you're a brand and you might have the best and be the most engaging person in the world, and you can tell a great story and you're going to be successful, they're still not going to bet on you. They don't bet on you. They bet on a sure thing. So another thing you got to remember, like when you're doing grants, is you might or might not get it. I mean, to be honest with you, the statistics show that a good grant writer hits about 37%. 37%.
Wow.
That means you fail more than 50%.
Right.
You know, it's almost like Major League Baseball. A good hitter is a guy who hits, 300. Well, that means 2/3 of the time you're out. That kind of thing. So it's something you've got to also remember. To me, grants are always a bonus. You should have a strategy in place where you do a face-to-face personal giving, where you do an event or two kind of thing to get your name out there, as well as being a marketing tool. That's one of the biggest things. Oh, if I'm going to get a grant, I'm going to get it. And keep in mind, grants aren't always renewable. So sometimes, and we had this actually happen to us at my club, my last club that we were at. This is a grant we got every year for about $45,000-$50,000. They changed their priorities and they were giving to a big project. They were doing a multi-year project, so we were out.
Yep.
So luckily, I didn't budget for that. I knew we were going to get it, but we didn't get it. I knew we were going to get it. Usually we got it. And so I'm like, okay, this is what I'll spend it on. But luckily I didn't budget for it because they said, well, there's this big giant project coming to town and it's going to help a lot of people. They're homeless. And I was obviously at Boys and Girls Club. You're working with kids, not with the homeless. So they're going to help the homeless and work on that problem. So yeah, it's something you got to remember. They're not always consistent. It's not dependable. It might be the best way to say it. Kind of thing.
So you're stepping on a lot of those misconceptions. So I know you talked about a couple of them, but what are some of the other common misconceptions about grants that make it hard for nonprofits to really tell fact from fiction? And can you share some easy to understand tips for navigating these myths? I know you said don't budget for grants. I heard that one loud and clear. Yep. But is there anything else you like to share around that?
It's almost like I'm a big sports guy. I love sports. My son plays basketball and stuff. And so I have a lot of sports analogies. And they always talk about if you're in football and you're a defensive back and the quarterback throws a touchdown off of you, you're the receiver you were covering burns you and they score. They say you got to have, almost like a Ted Lasso, have the memory of a goldfish kind of thing. You got to forget it. You can't. Some people get so emotionally invested in their grants. This is the best grant in the world and it's going to help so many people and I'm behind it. And trust me, I'm an awesome person and I'm going to make sure it happens. And that's true. All of that is true, but you still might not get the grant. And so some people hang on and go, this grant thing is stupid and that foundation's stupid. And first thing is you can't get emotionally attached. You do a grant. You put your best foot forward, you write your narrative, you write how you're going to change the world and how this foundation can help you change the world, and then you submit it, and you cross your fingers and you move on. That's the first thing. The second thing is you got to plan. I've had so many people call me up and go, yeah, I need to get $40,000 by next month. You're not going to get it through a grant. You're not through a grant because you got to write it. A lot of times you got to write a letter of LOI. It's called an LOI, letter of interest. I'm interested in applying. And then they'll say, oh yeah, your project is worthy. So here's the full application, that kind of thing. You got to do all that. There's a lot of stuff to it. So you also need to plan. In fact, I carry a full calendar of grants that I've applied for. And I have the dates on them. And I put a little reminder, I live and die by Outlook. So I put it in Outlook that a month before it's due, it shows the date, but then a month before that, it'll do a reminder so I can start working on it to get it together. Because you don't want to kind of rush and put something together because the grantors see, they're getting 1,000 people applying for their money. And if you put together a sucky grant, just go, I'm going to just put it together, and they're going to go, oh, this is such a great project. They're not, because they're getting 1,000 great projects. So you've got to be the one to do something that will stand out. That'll be storytelling. We talk about, a lot of times at the summit, every other speaker after me was talking and said the word storytelling.
Yep.
You got to tell them the story of your organization and how your organization is changing the world and how this project will impact people, kind of thing. Those are the kinds of things you have to do. And you really have to plan. Like I said, planning ahead is a big deal. Like I said, I'm applying for right now. In fact, if you look, I'll show you. These are all grants that are going in to people today. A majority of them meet in February. Right. So I won't know about anything until March. But it's November to December, January, February, March. So right. I'm 4 months out just to hear what I'm doing, So right. That's a big thing. It's the planning is always essential. And then I'll say the last thing I would throw in is you don't want to scattershot things. You don't want to go out there and I'm just going to apply. I'm going to apply for everything for two reasons. One is because you'll water down what you're writing. Mm-hmm. And two, you'll grant people talk. If you get a program that helps you do research and stuff like Candid or what's the other one? I don't use the other one. Not GrantWatch, but it's like GrantWatch. If you use one of those, you'll see that there are people who serve on a couple of different boards. So mm-hmm. when you say the exact same narrative to the exact same person, they're going to go, oh, it's just a same old, that kind of thing. So you got to make sure that you're still making each one individual to that foundation kind of.
Right. So I'm going to ask, because you kind of delved into this, but and exactly what you said, it is true that every nonprofit, they're not easily going to get a grant just if they write right. a letter, right? So mm-hmm. what's the real steps they need to take? Showed your calendar. Mm-hmm. But what's those real steps that they need to take, and how can we make it helpful so that these steps are clear for everyone, not just the staff, but also the board? Because I think sometimes the board just thinks, oh, you can get a grant for that, and they don't understand the full process that it takes.
Right. Now, okay, I'll go timeline, and let me tell you one other thing. I forgot to mention this. This is real important. You got to make sure you know what the grant requirements are, mm-hmm. Because if you ever get, and I talk about this, and I've done plenty of federal grants, but if you get a federal grant, the reporting is usually a ton of money, but it's a buttload of reporting.
Paperwork and reporting.
Yeah. So you're going to be the one, just know that you get all this money and your board wants you to get all this money, but you're the one who's going to have to do all the reporting. And I can tell you that there's a grant that I know Sabrina got too. There's a federal grant that we got. It's called the mm-hmm. OJP. Mm-hmm. And the OJP, they want to know it's for serving kids, and it's a great grant. And it's usually a lot of money. My first year I got it, it was like $175,000. It's a huge amount. Yeah. But you also they want every single demographic. How many 5-year-olds? How many male 5-year-olds, female 5-year-olds? How many male white 5-year-olds? How many male black 5-year-olds? How many male Latino 5-year-olds? How many male Asian? You've got to have a way to track that, because if you don't, they have every right in the world to ask for that money back. So you need to know that. That's something that's real important. So my process is this. I figure out what we're going after money for. If it's a customer, if I'm working for someone, when I was working at the club, is that part of your mission first and foremost? Because, Boys and Girls Club, I'm going to use them because that's my benchmark. You can use that for anything. But if I suddenly, I didn't have the population in North Texas, and my other club was right by Oklahoma, so North Texas, to do a ballet studio, let's say. We had plenty of girls and a lot of kids dance, but did I have the capacity? Did I have the space? Did I have the ability to teach ballet? Right. Oh, there's a ballet grant for $25,000. That won't sustain a program. How am I going to sustain it afterwards? So you got to see if that's following your mission, first of all. You don't just do a grant to do a grant. Second of all, do the research. You've got to look at the grantors, where they give, what they give. There's some that are in specific counties and only give to those counties. But the flip side of that is sometimes if they don't get enough good applications from that county, they expand it to the state. I mean, right now I'm in for an application in El Paso for a foundation from El Paso. And the reason why is because they say their area of service is first El Paso County, second Texas. So I'm in Texas. So if I'm sure the people in El Paso will probably get a larger grant. They'll have bigger opportunities. But if not enough people apply, I'm available. So I look at that too. So I do all the research. I look at what they give to. Right now I'm working with a Catholic school. And one of the things it's a Catholic school. There's some foundations that don't want to get into religion. Mm-hmm. So I have to look, do they give to Catholic? Do they give to Christian? Do they give to Muslim? Whatever that is. You got to make sure you got to get those limitations. Then you find what the organization is, what the foundation is and what they'll give to and what their average gift is. Because you don't want to go to a foundation that's giving $5,000 and asking for a $90,000 project. You also don't want to make them the only one because they don't want to be the reason you live or die on your little project. So you gotta parse it out. Like, so if their average gift, if I had a $100,000 project and their average gift is $10,000, what I want to do is find 10 people at $10,000, 10 foundations at $10,000. Mm-hmm. And then I list that I'm applying to these 10 foundations at $10,000. So we're all part of this solution, that kind of thing. Then you write it. And the way I write it is I will usually put on my headphones, and if you saw when I did the summit, I have a playlist, a grant playlist. I have two different ones. One that's kind of light on lyrics, like it's Pink Floyd, and it's a real deep kind of music. And I do that because especially when I write federal grants, because they're so intensive. And then I finish, and I know my limits because I finish with with Phil Collins, I Don't Care Anymore. That's my closer song, because I know after 75, it's about a 75-minute playlist for me. Because if I go too long, I'll start to get stupid. I'll start to not make sense in what I'm trying to say. It'll make sense to me, but it won't make sense on paper. So you gotta, and I just sit and I write, and then I read it. And luckily my wife is she would be a proofreader for a newspaper if they need, like a publisher or an editor for a newspaper, because she's just so great with grammar and corrections and stuff like that. And I run it by her. I said, how does this sound? What do you think? And then I'll stop and I'll take a day off, and then I'll go back to it and I'll try to refine it, kind of thing. But thus the essential important part of giving yourself some time. Now here's something that's real interesting though. You saw when I held the envelopes up just a minute ago, know when the foundation stuff is due, and also know how they take it. Because you'd think, hey, we're in the technological age, it's the internet, I'm going to just submit something online. All those ask for a hard copy. So I've got 21 right there that are about to go off that are hard copies. And if it were due tomorrow, they're not going to make it in time. So you got to plan that out. In fact, I'll even tell you, this is a true story, and it really ticked me off, like to no end. It was crazy. We applied for a grant. It's called in Texas. It's called the ACE program, but it's a 21st century grant.
21st century.
We applied for the ACE program. I applied for it. I sent it out. I sent it 3 days in advance, because going from when I lived in Marshall, to Austin, mm-hmm. Mail-wise, it's usually a day and a half. If I got it in early in the day, it'd be there the next day. It's not too bad a deal. Well, I get a letter coming back, and it says that you've been rejected. I go, that's a good grant. I wonder why. I looked at it, because it was not received on time. And I go, what? What do you mean not received on time? What ended up happening was their mail people at the TEA, the Texas Education Association, I think that's what it is, Alliance Association, they delivered it to the wrong office. And then by the time they figured out that they delivered it to the wrong office and got it to the right office, past the date. And they're like, sorry. What? Yeah. I did everything 100% right. I met the timelines. It was a good grant. Please, is your mistake. Can you reconsider? No, wasn't in our hands. It said it had to be in our hands by these dates. So you got to give yourself that time for, especially like I said, for hard copy. So you got to know all about that. Then after
I had FedEx slips on hand just for those occasions.
Yeah, exactly. But sometimes, like I said, in this case, it didn't matter. I did it on time too. It didn't matter. Yeah. Then finally, what usually a lot of times the grantors will tell you when they're going to make a decision and stuff on that. But if they don't, I usually go 6 weeks after I submit. I follow up with an email to them. Hey, I submitted a grant. Just wondering the status. Have you made a decision? Now, keep in mind, like I told you, you also got 6 weeks after their date. I told you I'm just applying for a bunch of grants that are going to be just looked at in February. So I
Right.
wouldn't send them a letter, an email 6 weeks from today, since I'm sending those off. I would obviously send off 6 weeks after February. So late March, probably, I would send something to them and say, hey, how are we looking? Have you made any decisions?
Right.
That kind of thing. That's kind of where I'm going with this. So, but that's the process. It's not a quick process. As you can see, I just chronicled a 4-month process for
Yeah.
some grants, and you can't always go, I'll throw this in, can't always go for the home run, because everybody's like, oh, I'm going to go, I got a $3 million grant. Yeah, I've gotten a $1 million grant before in my life too, and it's really awesome. You feel really good, and you're like, oh my gosh, look what we can do. But if you can get a bunch of those $5,000 ones, those stack up pretty quick. Those allow
Yeah.
you to do some cool stuff for your organization, whether it's buying more food or buying more ovens or giving more scholarships to kids or making sure you can distribute more blankets for homeless people or whatever. It'll give
Right.
you that. It all adds up. So it's about being consistent with it as well when you do those grants.
That's a good point. But y'all, do y'all see why I don't like grant writing? That's so much. It's just too
It is.
much.
It
And
is.
and
It's a
I
lot.
appreciate the people who get a great tingle in their soul from grant writing. Now I will say this: if you are running a nonprofit, you cannot get away without doing grant writing. But I'm telling you, as soon as I grew my budget enough where I could hire a grant writer, that's
Yep.
exactly what I did. And so if you're looking for a good grant writer, Brian, I got one more myth question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
Are there any secret tricks or shortcuts to make grant writing easier for nonprofits? Or is it more like you've been describing, a journey of twists and turns?
Mhm.
And really, how can we demystify the process for those who might be feeling a bit lost or who has that
Yeah.
animosity towards the process like I do?
Well, you, well, you got to first and foremost, like I said, you got to be organized. You got to plan. You got to know when you can find the grants. Um, but there's not a like I said, you plan ahead. There's not a quick and easy answer. Very rarely do you get somebody who says we're opening something up for a month and we'll make a decision in a month. So you've got to understand that, like you said, it's a journey. When you do it, and you've got to continually do that journey. You got to keep,
Yeah.
if I'm going to lose weight, got to work out every day. I can't work out, once a month kind of thing. You got to continue to, you got to continue to do that. Now, I will tell you this one thing that I do, and again, you got to make sure you individualize it, because it's not good to just cut and paste to 10 different foundations with the same stuff, because you're bound to say something, that's different, or you might accidentally say, oh, I'd love to do the Jones Foundation, but you accidentally send it to the Smith Foundation, that kind of thing. You don't want to do that, because that puts you on a grant list, and then they'll know you're just they consider it like spamming, like you're just
Mm-hmm.
sending stuff off to them, so you won't get considered in the future. But I'll do through like 3 at a time, but it's the same project. So I'll find 3 foundations that align with what my project is, align with my mission, and I can do them consecutively, because the need statement is going to be the same,
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. The ask is probably going to be different, and some of them might help in one way versus another way. So you can do that, and that will help you get more. But you just have to understand too. I had one of my wife's good friends, her hairdresser, in fact. She does an alopecia group, hairdresser alopecia. She trying to help people with alopecia. She's like, I need you to write me a $25,000 grant. She started her foundation at the beginning of the year. It's legit. It's 501c3 and all that stuff. You got to understand. You got to put some numbers and put some history behind what you're
Mm-hmm.
doing too. And again, that's not meant to be discouraging. I don't want to be discouraging at all, because, like I said, everybody's trying to do good. That's what nonprofits are in the world, to try to do good. Try to make the world a better place than when you left it. But you got to understand. You got to be in place. You got to have all this stuff ready. I mean, I had a customer, side note, they're going to ask you for your 501c3. So if I write a grant for you, you got to have it in a digital format so you can send it to me, because I got to submit it. You're going to have to list who your board members are. You're going to probably have to have your last 2 or 3 board meetings so they can read and make sure you're legitimate. You got to have all those different things in place.
Yep.
So you can do it, not just, and then of course your organizational budget,
Yep.
and then of course your project budget, and then of course your most recent 990 if you had an audit. Those kind of things. I mean, they ask for a lot, and I'll put you $5 that if I'm a guy on a foundation board and I'm getting 5,000 grants a year, I'm not looking at somebody's 990. They're making you jump through hoops, but have it ready. Have it ready. You know you're going to need it.
But you know, there, Brian, I would say to the foundation defense, because I've helped so many foundations write their policies. They're just trying to do their due diligence to make sure that you're a legitimate, successful nonprofit.
But my point being, Sabrina, is if I turn in, I mean, the way I feel most, again, if you're just you or me, we're just regular kind of people, and I'm on a foundation, I'm looking at grant, I'm not scouring a 50-page document for 1,000 different organizations. I'm going to say, oh, good, you got a 990 and an audit? Yeah, you're legit.
Right.
Or you wouldn't have sent it to me. You know what I mean? You wouldn't. You're not going to send me something that says, oh yeah, and you're in debt by $50,000. I'm not going to do that. So I think they have that logic, but they still make you. Those are some of the hoops that you have to jump through.
Right. Go back to alopecia.
Alopecia. Okay.
She was. She started a nonprofit.
Did.
She just got it.
Yep. But right shortly after the first of the year.
Shortly after the first of the year, she wanted you to write her a $25,000 grant. What was the problem? Why couldn't you do it again?
The problem we had was she didn't have her. It was still an idea. She had not, at the time, she had not served any people. She didn't have any customers. I mean, being a hairdresser, she did. I mean, she made wigs and stuff like that. But this was also a pride thing about being, women, especially because women are often, unfortunately, are often judged by the way they look. And, when you don't have hair, because I know when you don't have hair and stuff, you put something on and stuff like that. So they're trying to, it's a situation like it was to help them with pride and stuff, and be proud of who you are, whether or not you have hair. And that's great. And I'm with her. But when you serve no people, it's a great idea. Right. It's not a foundation. I have not helped anybody. And she hadn't at the time. So that in that regard, I said, you probably want to start off, if you get awareness, you're probably better doing an event. You're probably better doing a giving campaign. And by the way, not GoFundMe. GoFundMe, in my opinion, makes everybody look like you're some half hobo kind of not in there kind of organization. It's just, I just need some money. And because the same people, when you ask for your grant, hey, GoFundMe for, an alopecia organization, you also have people going, boy, my honeymoon and my husband and my new husband really deserves a great honeymoon in Hawaii. Exactly. So we'd love for you to go fund me for Hawaii too. And you're like going, there's a disconnect. It's not the same thing. So, I don't think GoFundMe is a bad thing, but I think for asking for money, it screams of desperation.
There's too many platforms out there where you can do peer-to-peer campaign. And you do not have
but I would do that. And that's what I told her. I said, that's what you need to do. You need to get out there and you need to go shake hands and you say, I'm with the Alopecia Foundation and, this is what we're doing. And sometimes it's even good just to get your name out there so they know that you're there and you're legit. I'm not going to ask you for a nickel. I'm just here. Just want you to know, if you know anybody with alopecia, I'd love to help them. And I'm trying to help change the world in a whole different, alopecia is going to lose the battle to the sad dogs that Sarah McLachlan sings about all the time. And to St. Jude's, the kids with cancer, you're going to lose to those. On the food chain, alopecia is lower than those two. But when people know, oh, wait, top of mind. Yeah, I do have a friend who's losing their hair and they think it might be alopecia. What can we do? That's how you got to get yourself known first. And that in her case, and that's what I told her. And by the way, side note, she put on an event with it that my wife was the MC for and raised $20,000. So that's great. That shows, and again, to a grantor or to anybody, it shows a little bit of legitimacy, not, hey, I'm living paycheck to paycheck. And you know what I mean?
Right.
That kind of thing.
People want to invest in success, even the foundations and the grants. And the other thing why I asked that question is because I wanted to highlight, just because you got your 501c3 doesn't mean you're grant ready. It's a whole journey. It's a myth, guys. Right. I can't stress that enough. Unless, and I always say unless maybe you're going after, and I know disparaging you may be going after like the Walmart grant or the Target grant. But when we're talking about foundation grants and larger grants, $25,000 or more, maybe $5,000 or more, let's just say, you're not playing yet.
Right.
You're not there.
Right. You're not in the game. You're not even in the game.
So let's get some of these people in the game. And unfortunately, let me just say this, Brian, full disclosure on my end. I don't know if they just got their 501c3 yesterday.
That's fine.
So, that could be a possibility.
I
doubt it. I doubt
I'm more than willing, though. Sabrina, I'm more than willing. If there's somebody new and they need help too, I'll be glad to go that route too, because I'm working with a lady in Philadelphia who does feeding the homeless people, homeless veterans at that. And she wasn't hooked up with it. Philadelphia has a great group of a huge amount of resources to get food for cheap and stuff. And she wasn't hooked up with any of that. She wasn't yet ready to get grants, but she was ready for this. So we'll work and make
it
sure
out.
we're taking care of it.
I'm